Imagine a movie so powerful, it revived an entire genre and turned a forgotten Roman general into a cinematic legend. Gladiator didn't just bring ancient Rome to life, it redefined what epic movies could be at the dawn of the 21st century. But behind Maximus's journey for revenge lies an even more fascinating story of battles, betrayal, and a fearless director on a mission to make history. The 21st century was about to begin, and Ridley Scott was beginning to lose relevance in Hollywood. Already far from his masterpiece, The Eighth Passenger, his last good film, Thelma and Louise, was in 1991. Scott Free Productions, a company created with his brother Tony, agreed to direct a script that did not promise much, since the historical action genre was somewhat forgotten. But with a mega budget of $100 million, the project had a future. Today, we're diving into the legend of Gladiator, from its unforgettable opening scenes to its lasting impact. The film begins directly with our main character, Maximus. In the year 180 AD, a battle is being fought in the forests that are presented to us as Germania. He faces tribes from a territory called Vindobona, an area that today would be located in Northern Europe. In the first scenes, we see him arrive, and that his soldiers have a lot of respect for him because of the way they look at him. He seems like someone experienced, successful, and recognized. His entire story can be divided into three main acts. This first stage can be called Maximus, the commander. The entire scene, filmed in the forests of Surrey in England, is very well achieved by the number of actors involved, the real fire used, the fights, the shots, the soundtrack. Without a doubt, an epic start at the height. After a wild battle, but with numerical superiority and strategy thanks to the orders and epic speech in between, it is a victory for the Roman Empire, under the orders of Marcus Aurelius, the Caesar, who is present watching everything from afar in the same place. And this is something of great importance to them, the soldiers, and the people, a concept that they repeat a lot during this story. The importance of fighting your own battles. It is clear that the Emperor and Maximus have a good relationship, of respect and affection. When everything is already resolved, the main antagonist of this story arrives on the battlefield, the son of Marcus Aurelius and legitimate heir to the empire, Commodus, accompanied by his sister Lucilla. We see that the Emperor is ill and is already thinking about who will take his place and responsibilities. From his words, he already has a slightly more pacifist vision of the end of his life. He thinks of Maximus as his heir, a career soldier with noble aspirations and a family man. Although our protagonist is a simple man, he only wants to return home and be able to spend his days there. That same night, he tells his son that he will not be the next emperor because of his lack of morals, something that he does not take well at all. He goes mad, and when it seems that he accepts his destiny and hugs his father, he actually suffocates him until he takes his life. Now, Commodus is the emperor, and he covers up his crime by claiming that only old age ended his father's life while he was sleeping. Maximus distrusts him, so he refuses to serve him. And when he is about to escape, he is intercepted by Quintus, now named the new head of the Praetorian Guard, which would be like the official guard of the royal family. Now they accuse him of the crime and order his execution. Hidden away, we see Cicero, servant and faithful friend of General Maximus, a character who will be relevant later on. When they reach the forest, he seems to accept his fate, but his story is just beginning. He manages to get rid of the Praetorians with great ease due to his experience and skills. Something that draws attention is the unquestioning obedience of the soldiers. Knowing that they must comply with an unjust order and execute a decorated and respected general, they are not seen to be distressed at any time, a detail that could have been well suited in my opinion. After escaping with a wound in his shoulder, he takes 2 horses and heads for his home in Hispania, an area that today would be found as Spain. He rides quickly since Quintus hinted that he would meet his family in the afterlife. Having to travel more than 1,000 kilometers on horseback, he must stop to rest both himself and the horses. He arrives late and finds himself in a terrible scene. He has already lost his son and his wife. And here ends the introduction to the story, undoubtedly one of the best in the world of cinema, and begins Act Number 2. Maximus, the gladiator. He wakes up in a carriage of locked-up slaves, where one of them has healed his wound as best he could. They are on their way to Zucabar, an area in North Africa. Upon reaching the settlement, he is bought by Proximo, a character who has a good evolution during the development of the story. Other slaves who met the physical requirements for which they are destined also accompany him, the most important being Juba. A little training, and they are ready to go out into the combat arena. Although Maximus initially refuses to fight, because of his tattoo, they intuit that he is an army deserter. He ends up accepting without having any other options. Meanwhile, in Rome, Commodus is officially crowned emperor, with a grand parade and triumphal entry. But they emphasize that he arrives as a conqueror who has conquered nothing.
Rome like a conquering hero. What has he conquered?
It is immediately noticeable that the people do not support the new Caesar as much, who were very loyal to his father, Marcus Aurelius. There is tension between Commodus and the Senate. These are the representatives elected by the people, but the new emperor sees them as old-fashioned and rich people abusing their position. So he wants to assume all the power without having to consult anyone. His sister tries to act as an intermediary and calm the situation. Since his popular image is at stake, he does not feel that the people support him. So he decides to make public policy by organizing 150 days of games to honor his father and win the affection of the people. As we see, this type of demagoguery was done 2,000 years ago and continues to be done today. Back in Zucabar, in the combat arena, the gladiators fight with clear disadvantages in equipment, but with a demonstration of skill and leadership by Maximus. They manage to beat everyone and gain popularity among the spectators. Thanks to this, Proximo announces that they will travel to Rome, with the possibility of fighting in the Colosseum itself. With some impressive digital images of the Roman Empire in its maximum splendor, they arrive at the imposing city. They will represent the combat of the Battle of Zama, but their role is the losing side, the Carthaginian soldiers. Therefore, they assume that their chances of success are almost nil. Knowing that Commodus himself will be present, he decides to hide his face with a helmet that covers his face. Thanks to his experience in combat and leadership skills, they manage to survive the impossible. What seemed like a carnage becomes an epic battle, and the gladiators obtain victory. The public is euphoric for the gladiator and his skills. For this reason, the emperor himself comes down and decides to meet him in person, ordered to remove his helmet. After refusing and having no other option, he makes one of the most epic presentations in the history of cinema.
My name is Maximus Decimus.
A detail that we can observe after the victory is that Maximus thought very carefully about his revenge, when for a moment he is about to throw his spear at Caesar. Due to the distance and the complexity, he could fail. And when he kneels down, he takes an arrowhead again, but he stops himself. Shocked, surprised, and even with fear on his face, now Commodus must decide if he spares his life. But fearing that the people will turn against him, this time the thumb goes up. Although we know that this is an intentional mistake, since in the past, the gesture meant the opposite. The emperor knows that he must eliminate him as soon as possible. That is why he organizes a next fight against an undefeated gladiator, Tigris. Now Maximus has become very popular, which only infuriates the tyrant emperor more. The gladiator no longer fights only to survive, but to seek revenge against Commodus. In the arena of combat, everything is against him, but he still manages to survive and defeat his opponent. To be honest, he didn't seem that skilled and imposing except for his armor. He looked slow and heavy. The tigers weren't too dangerous and he got rid of them easily. And did you know that a rhinoceros was included in the original script? There were even tests with CGI, but it was discarded. To learn more about these behind-the-scenes details, I invite you to watch this video where we review errors, curiosities, and much more about Gladiator. When he has him defeated on the ground, the emperor decides his fate: he must be executed, to which Maximus refuses. The people, euphoric about his act of mercy, chant his name. Maximus, the compassionate, Commodus writhes with anger at his incredible popularity. A detail that we see in the Colosseum: in a desperate attempt to win the affection of the people, he distributes free food among the spectators, throwing fruits and vegetables into the stands. Here begins the third and final act. Maximus, the rebel. Cicero, who has been following the whole story from the shadows, decides to intervene and say a few words that mean a lot. When Lucilla goes in his carriage, he tells her that he still serves General Maximus, and she schedules a secret meeting.
The general sends word he will meet your politician.
Now, Lucilla, who is always in love with Maximus, visits him in prison, and they plot a conspiracy together with one of the senators to end the government of Commodus. The plan is to buy Maximus and free him from his slavery, to command his army and overthrow the new empire. But the emperor has his allies, and through another of the senators, he threatens his nephew, Lucius Verus, a very important character for the sequel, to obtain information and confession from Lucilla. This is how he finds out about the plot against him. So he orders an attack in the middle of the night. The Praetorian Guard arrives where the gladiators rest and a battle begins. Proximo frees Maximus and all his slaves, knowing that he has no other options, and when he is cornered, he accepts his destiny. This character went from being a cruel slave trader who only obtained money in exchange for bloody entertainment to being fundamental in the outcome of the story. When he was going to meet with Cicero, it was all a trap. That is how he is cornered and put in a cell to fight against the emperor himself in the Colosseum. But knowing of his few chances in a fight against the general, he visits him before going out to the arena and seriously wounds him on one side. Here, a detail that is clear in the film, but that is assumed from the original script, is that the spearhead was poisoned, something that was common at that time. It would also explain the hallucinations he suffered during the fight. They put the armor on him to cover the wound. Commodus's intention is to gain the recognition of the public by defeating someone who is considered a skilled warrior. When they appear before the public, the fight begins. It seems close, but the rookie emperor is no match for the experienced soldier and manages to defeat him even though he is wounded and dying. In a cowardly act, Commodus takes out a weapon to attack from behind, but he still can't land a single blow. So Maximus decides to finish off the one who ruined his entire life. A nice detail is that the emperor has lost the respect of even his chief of guard, who refuses to give his soldiers a new sword during the fight. This is not sudden and has its development. Since in previous scenes we saw how he executed innocents, even when Quintus told him it was not necessary. Now he has achieved his revenge, but not at the cost of his own life. He falls to the ground, earns the respect of all the people, and, having no reason to continue fighting, decides to reunite with his family in another life. While we are shown images of that longed-for reunion with an exquisite soundtrack. The author of this was Hans Zimmer, a prodigy in this musical field who has been responsible for making scenes in films that are simply epic. As his last words, he asks for his fellow gladiators to be released, and Lucilla orders a funeral to be organized for him, with all the honors corresponding to someone who gave his life for the Roman Empire. Maximus's body is carried away on a stretcher, while Commodus is left on the ground, a detail that is no less important. In the final scene, we see how Juba buries some wooden figures representing Maximus and his family in the sand of the Colosseum. In this whole story, there are subplots that develop the betrayal, the squandering of the emperor's money, the discontent of the Senate, the friendship of Juba and Maximus, Lucilla and Lucius in the midst of the emperor's madness. All these scenes add depth to what appears to be just a bloody story of merciless fighters. That is why Gladiator was undoubtedly the great film of the beginning of the century that satisfied a large audience that loves this genre. Something that was attempted to be replicated years later, but no film has achieved such a legacy. Now let's hope that the sequel lives up to this incredible story and is not another Twister's case. For now, the cast and the scenes in the trailer are promising and keep us waiting for its release. If you liked the video, I invite you to subscribe and give it a like. There is much more content of this style, and I read your suggestions in the comments. Until the next video,